Don Benner was born on December 20th, 1925 in Springfield, Illinois. He lived there until he served in the Navy for 2.5 years during World War II, then continued his service upon completion of the war. He enlisted before he was eligible for the draft.
I enlisted. What started a man come to high school and wanted to know if anybody in the school would be interested in flying for the Navy. That sounded pretty good.
After the meeting with the recruiter, he found out he couldn't enlist in Springfield. Mr. Benner had to travel 80 miles to enlist.
I had to go to St. Louis then to enlist. And yeah, there was another boy out of Springfield went down the same time I did. And we joined up down in St. Louis. That was in November the 8th, 1943. We thought we were going to go right in. Found out things didn't operate that way because we had to go to school for begin with. And the class didn't start until March of 44. So we had to wait that till 44 to leave. But at least by joining in when we did, we didn't get drafted. What would have happened in December of 43. And then I'd have been in the Army. That didn't sound good to me.
Instead of starting out at boot camp after enlisting, he attended a school to become a Navy pilot in St. Peter, Minnesota.
Because when I had to go on the 1st of March, they sent me a notice in February to report to St. Peter, Minnesota, to Gustavus Adolphus College. And I was supposed to go then for 2 years there. And after we got up there, some of us got to talking. We figured 2 years' time from then, the war would probably be over, and we'd miss it all. So, wasn't too long, about a dozen of us went to the commanding officer and asked if we could get transferred. He said it wasn't possible. He said, you either complete the course or you flunk. So there was 12 of us flunked real quick. First time the grades come out, we all had zeros. So we went to Great Lakes, into the regular Navy then. Went to boot camp from the 1st of June till middle of August.
At his boot camp, the diversity was surprising.
I think I was the only one from Illinois. They were from Michigan, Ohio, South Dakota, kind of brought in from every place, all thrown together. It didn't really matter much. One thing too, when you're in uniform, you can't tell the poor guys from the rich ones. They're all alike.
At boot camp, he had his daily routines.
Just you had to straighten everything up first thing. Then they always had something. We usually went out to calisthenics and such stuff. They did a lot of that. A lot of marching. Just teaching you to follow orders, I think, was a basic idea.
While at boot camp, Seaman Don Benner had a few disciplinary problems.
Like I said, I did get in trouble a few times. Couldn't keep my mouth shut. You don't talk back to the chief when he tells you something. When you're 19, you don't always learn that in a hurry.
After his completion of boot camp, Seaman Don Benner traveled frequently, starting with his trip to Oklahoma.
Then I went to Norman, Oklahoma, to ordnance school. And from there, I was there till January of 45. And then I was sent to Whidbey Island, Washington, south in Puget Sound, to a gunnery school. And while I was there, they discontinued the program. They began to see, from reading now and looking back what's happened, they was beginning to project the end of the war. And so they were cutting expenses, so they closed us up. So then while I was there, I developed a hernia. And so I went to sick bay with it. They said, we'll either send you to Seattle or send you to California, whichever one you want to go. And I said, I've never been to California. So I went that way.
After being treated in California, Seaman Benner went on to classroom military training.
What you learned in the classroom was more about guns and taking them apart and reassembling them. Learned about the other bombs and such as that. That's what the classroom studies.
After his classroom studies, he worked on planes, which he learned about on the job, through hands-on experience. He had to consult others when dealing with some parts.
Oh yeah, always, especially when you're learning to take things apart and put them back together. I always had to be trained on that to start with.
Seaman Benner was a mechanic who repaired small fighter planes during the war. The technology surprised him, although it is not much compared to today.
It was amazing, even back then, the change from the time of the beginning of the war till the end of it, the progress they made in airplanes. Because the planes we worked on when I got out there, everything was mechanical, where everything's hydraulic, and such now. But on the mechanical planes, everything ran on cables and pulleys, and when the guy raised his wheels, he had to do it by hand with a hand crank. Had back then, that's another interesting difference in the planes. They started with a cartridge, looked like a big shotgun shell. Then when it fired off, it cranked the plane over. That's what started the engine. Most of the planes that worked on just a pilot was on it by himself.
He enjoyed working with all the planes and the many parts that comprised them.
Just about all of them, all the parts. I mean, it's interesting just to be able to tear them, work on them and tear them apart, whatever. Just like working on anything else.
He enjoyed taking the planes apart, but none of his repairs were too extensive.
I think a lot of the real bad ones, they just junked them. But mostly we had needed engine repairs of what we worked on.
For Mr. Benner, the atmosphere of the aircraft carriers was just as interesting as fixing the planes themselves.
Their hangar deck is where they carry them, and it was full. Because they got elevators on them, then take them up the flight deck. I think back then, if I remember right, I know one carrier only had one elevator. Where the ones today, they're 4 and 5 around the deck. So they could move more at one time now. You push it by hand out onto an elevator and raise it up and put it on the flight deck.
While on these aircraft carriers, he was traveling on the Pacific Ocean.
Of course, everything out in the Pacific was warm. You didn't have winter time. Missed winter out there. I mean, I didn't miss it. I just skipped it. Because it was nice not having snow and whatever.
While in the service, Seaman Benner also had other jobs besides repairing planes.
I did work in the kitchen for a while, so that's good duty. We ate steak when nobody else did. One thing we did, we don't have much here. We had mutton, which is sheep, because they bought it from Australia. So it was all right, but it wasn't like eating at home.
When not working in the kitchen, he had other jobs that were not as exciting as working on the planes.
They're monotonous. Probably the best job was when I was on Hawaii when war was still going on. Was you had to fire up all the planes every morning and check them out, service them, check the oil, all this kind of stuff, and get in and run the engines and make sure that everything was working. Give them a full inspection. That was more interesting than the dull work like walking post.
When not working on planes, Seaman Benner enjoyed many facets of his service in the Navy.
Just being on ships and being on locations and all the places you got to go.
Besides ship life, he enjoyed the different states he was stationed in.
Hawaii was good. We were stationed right on the water. All the free time I had, I was swimming, which was great. flowers and everything were pretty. Where we were at, we were on the opposite side of the island from Honolulu, so we had to go up over a mountain to go to Honolulu. That was interesting, because they had all native drivers, old rickety buses.
While in Hawaii, the war ended. The servicemen met it with a surprising response.
Yeah, the war ended while I was in Hawaii. Nighttime when they announced it. Guy come in and said the war is over, and everybody said shut up, we're sleeping. After I left Hawaii, I went to Guam and was stationed out there for 6 months. It hadn't begun to really grow up and do anything yet. I mean, it was native areas were still native. They had wooden shack houses, and we didn't have a lot of contact with them, really. They all claimed they weren't Guams. They said the other guys were natives, that they were Spanish, so I think everybody I talked to said that. So there must not have been any really natives.
Upon the completion of Seaman Benner's service in the Navy, he returned home and traveled to many places that he had never thought he would encounter.
Then when we come home, we came through Panama Canal and went all the way around to New York. That was all interesting.
One of these places that he found interesting was the Panama Canal, which he visited after the war commenced, when he was heading home after his deployment.
It's real interesting. It's a lot of locks and dams, changing levels in it. It's small, really. I mean, just wide enough for a ship to go through. Usually it has to be tied on, either raise the water level or let it down.
After traveling through the Panama Canal, Mr. Don Benner returned home on a crowded ship.
Ship I come home on, the bunks were stacked and they were only about a foot apart. I had the bottom bunk. He just laid on the floor and rolled in. It was full, thousands. To me, anyway, any ship felt like a run out of space in a hurry, no matter how big it was. It's not like being at home or around on the ground. There were days when you had to take saltwater showers, but it wasn't really bad. You could live with it. One time was on board ship, we ran into a typhoon. That got a little rough for a while.
Mr. Benner tried to save his money even though he was away from home.
Got to save money, wasn't to spend it on. Of course, didn't make much. I was getting $65 a month.
Being paid so little for doing so much during the war didn't faze Mr. Benner, because he doesn't believe he contributed very much to the war effort.
It just took everybody, I guess. As long as there was enough numbers, I suppose that's what got the job done, but nobody really feels like you did it yourself.
Since he was just one of the many soldiers that was fighting in the war, he allowed himself to enjoy visiting all the different places during his service.
Just traveling, I think, being with other people and seeing all the places we saw. Saw a lot of big cities. We took a transport and came through Panama and around to New York, docked in at New York Harbor, but the only space we spent in New York was to walk across the dock where we were at and got on a ferry that took us to New Jersey. We jumped off of it and walked about a block or two and got on a train, and the next morning we woke up, we were in Pennsylvania. So we didn't see much on the East Coast.
After he got settled down, he went on a job hunt, since he didn't have any employment waiting for him when he got home.
As soon as I could find a job, the first thing I did, I could to hunt and see what I could do. I pumped gas and filling station to start with. And we just, whatever came up. Because it wasn't planting. I got home in May and most of the planting was already done. So there wasn't any farm work really to get into at that time of year.
Even though Mr. Benner was able to find employment back home, he he still found it difficult to adjust to civilian life.
Because even though the cars back at that time didn't go like today, I was ready to re-enlist and go back in the Navy after a couple of days. Because I think the top speed limit out in Guam out there was like 15, 20 miles an hour. Everything moved real slow. I come home and started driving. Everybody was speeding all around.
Hearing about the sacrifices made by the soldiers who fought and protected this country and others during World War II will never lose its importance. In this day and age, it is easy for our daily society to forget how much those who served in World War II dedicated their life to our country's cause in a war that has shaped the United States into what it is today. Mr. Don Benner's work in World War II is one of the many stories of those who gave themselves to that cause. Being able to talk to Mr. Benner about his service allowed us to get a closer glimpse as to what World War II was like and better appreciate the commitment he and others put forth for the cause of our country and around the world. Mr. Don Benner's commitment to our country's cause shows his unending courage and patriotism. Being able to hear him recount his experiences from when he served in the war was a great honor. On behalf of myself and my other group members, we would like to personally thank Don Benner for his service in the Navy during World War II and allowing us to hear his experiences. We can never thank you enough for all you did for our country. Thank you.